The scent of burnt sugar and old resentment hung heavy in the air of the sprawling Victorian house. It was Aunt Beatrice's annual summer garden party, an event I had dreaded for 20 years, ever since my parents died and I, Clara, then a timid 10-year-old, was sent to live with my mother's elder sister. Now at 30, I still felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach as I carried a tray of Beatrice's infamously dry shortbread cookies towards the chattering guests. Beatrice was a formidable woman, a matriarch who ruled her family with an iron fist disguised in velvet gloves. Her silver hair was always impeccably coiffed, her silk dresses rustled with authority, and her piercing blue eyes missed nothing. To the outside world, she was a benevolent, if eccentric, guardian who had taken in her orphaned niece. In reality, I was her unpaid housekeeper, personal assistant, and emotional punching bag. Clara, darling, her voice, sharp as cut glass, sliced through the garden chatter. Are those cookies not moving fast enough? You know how Uncle Arthur detests stale pastries. I offered a strained smile, my arm aching from the heavy tray. They're going, Aunt Beatrice. The lemonade is also quite popular. She merely sniffed, adjusting a pearl necklace. Popularity is for common things, Clara. My lemonade is merely adequate. Now go attend to the rose bushes. They look rather unkempt. I bit back a retort, the taste of burnt sugar suddenly bitter in my mouth. Unkempt was Beatrice's favorite word for anything that wasn't under her meticulous control, and for 20 years my life had been constantly unkempt in her eyes. My parents had been artists, free spirits who lived modestly but joyously. Beatrice, a woman of inherited wealth and rigid social graces, had always disapproved. She'd seen their bohemian lifestyle as a personal affront to the family's good name. After their sudden deaths in a car accident, she'd swooped in, offering to take me in with a performative display of Christian charity that masked a deep-seated desire to fix me, to mold me into a proper, obedient lady. Her fixing involved withdrawing me from my beloved art classes, enrolling me in a finishing school focused on etiquette and homemaking, and slowly, systematically eroding my self-worth. Every ambition, every dream I nurtured was met with a dismissive wave of her hand or a patronizing smile. Artists starve, Clara. You need stability. You need to be useful. And useful I became, running her sprawling household, managing her finances, and catering to her every whim, all while she reminded me of the immense debt of gratitude I owed her. But something had shifted in me recently. A tiny, stubborn spark of rebellion, long dormant, had begun to flicker. It started subtly, with stolen moments sketching in the attic, then escalated to secretly applying for online art courses. The recent garden party felt like the crucible, the final test of my endurance. As I pruned a wilting rose, my cousin Julian sauntered over. Julian was Beatrice's only child, a perpetually charming but utterly feckless man of 32 who had never worked a day in his life. He benefited from his mother's wealth and rarely lifted a finger, yet somehow always managed to make me feel small. Still playing gardener, Clara, he drawled, taking a sip of his champagne. Mother says you have a knack for keeping things thriving. I straightened up, meeting his gaze. Someone has to, Julian. Unlike some, I don't have an endless trust fund. His smile faltered slightly. Ouch, feisty today, aren't we? Is it because James isn't here? James, my heart gave a little lurch. James was a kind, intelligent historian I'd met at a local library event a few months ago. He saw past the useful niece facade and genuinely admired my quiet strength and my budding artistic talent. We'd been secretly seeing each other, a clandestine romance I knew Beatrice would never approve of. She had a grand vision for my future, involving a marriage to a man of suitable means, preferably one who could further her social standing. James, a university lecturer with modest income, was decidedly not part of that vision. James is busy, I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. Unlike you, he has a profession. Julian chuckled, seemingly unfazed. Careful, Clara, mother might hear you, and you know how she feels about impropriety. He winked, then strolled off to flirt with a pretty young guest. Later that evening, after the last guest had departed and I had meticulously cleaned every crystal glass and polished every silver spoon, Beatrice summoned me to her study. The room was dark, heavy with the scent of old leather and Beatrice's expensive perfume. Clara, she said, her voice unusually soft, a tone I mistrusted immediately. Come sit. I perched on the edge of a velvet armchair, bracing myself. You've been distant lately, she continued, swirling a glass of sherry, and I've noticed a certain impudence in your demeanor. Is there something you wish to tell me? My heart hammered against my ribs. Had she found out about James or my art classes? No, Aunt Beatrice, I lied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I'm merely tired. The party was quite a lot of work. She smiled, a thin, knowing smile that chilled me to the bone. Indeed, it was, and you handled it beautifully, as always. You are so indispensable, Clara. Where would I be without you? She took a sip of her sherry, her eyes fixed on me, which is why I'm so grateful that you've agreed to something rather important. Julian and I have been discussing his future. It's time he settled down, and we've found the perfect match. My stomach churned. Oh, and who is the lucky woman? Eleanor Davenport, Beatrice announced, her eyes gleaming. Her family owns half the shipping lanes in the country, a most advantageous alliance, and she's quite taken with Julian, though of course Julian is a fool about these things and needs a guiding hand. I stared at her, utterly bewildered. What did this have to do with me? And I prompted, my voice tight. Beatrice leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. And my dear, Julian needs a proper home for his new bride, not this old pile, something fresh, something his own. So we've decided he will move into the cottage. The cottage, my cottage, the small, charming stone cottage at the edge of the estate, nestled amongst ancient oak trees. It was where I had found solace, where I painted, where I truly felt at home. My parents had lived there before they moved into the main house when I was born. It was the one place that felt like mine. The cottage, I repeated, the words barely a whisper. But I live there, Aunt Beatrice. She waved a dismissive hand. Nonsense, darling, you reside there, it's part of the estate, and frankly, it's a waste on you. Julian needs it for his new life. Of course, you'll move back into the house. There's that small room next to the linen closet. It will be quite cozy. A small room next to the linen closet. After 20 years of being her live-in housekeeper, after running her entire life, she was relegating me to a glorified servant's quarters to make way for her feckless son and his wealthy bride. The rage, long suppressed, finally roared to life within me. It was a cold, pure fury that cleared my mind, sharpening my senses. No, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Beatrice blinked, clearly unaccustomed to such defiance. No, what do you mean no, Clara? This is not a request, it's a decision. It's not your decision to make, I replied, standing up. The cottage is mine. She let out a short, incredulous laugh. Yours, don't be absurd. Everything on this estate is mine. It was left to me by my father. No, Aunt Beatrice, I said, looking her directly in the eye. The cottage was left to my mother by her father as a wedding gift. It was explicitly stated in his will that it was to be hers and then to her children. It was never part of your inheritance. You just never bothered to check the details, did you? Beatrice's face went slack. Her perfectly made-up features seemed to crumple. What are you talking about? The will, I repeated, my voice unwavering. Grandfather's will. I found a copy in Mother's old trunk in the attic. You see, Aunt Beatrice, while you were busy controlling my life, I was busy learning how to read. Her sherry glass clattered against the mahogany desk. You searched through my private papers. How dare you? They weren't your private papers, I countered. They were my mother's, and by extension mine, and in them I found the truth. The cottage and a small trust fund specifically for its upkeep belonged to me, not to you, not to Julian, to me. The silence that followed was suffocating. Beatrice stared at me, her blue eyes wide with shock, then narrowing into slits of pure venom. You ungrateful little viper, she hissed, finally finding her voice. After everything I've done for you. What you've done for me, I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You've enslaved me. You've stolen my youth, my dreams, my very identity. You've treated me like a servant in my own home, all while pretending to be my savior. And for what? So Julian can have a convenient love nest. Her face was mottled with red and white patches. You'll regret this, Clara. You have no idea who you're dealing with. So I think I have a very clear idea, I said, walking towards the door. And now you have an idea of who you're dealing with. I'm no longer that timid 10-year-old. I'm Clara, and the cottage is mine, and I'm not giving it up for Julian or anyone else. I left the study, closing the door softly behind me. My heart was still pounding, but it was a different kind of beat now, the exhilarating rhythm of freedom. The next morning, the house was a battlefield of simmering tensions. Beatrice had clearly informed Julian, who now looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and wounded entitlement. Mother says you're claiming the cottage, Julian said, confronting me over a breakfast of burnt toast and watery coffee. I had deliberately sabotaged the kitchen in a small act of defiance. It's not a claim, Julian, it's a fact, I replied, pouring myself a fresh cup of coffee. The cottage is legally mine, always has been. That's ridiculous. Mother would never allow something like that, he scoffed. Perhaps Mother isn't as omnipotent as she'd like you to believe, I said, taking a deliberate sip of my coffee. Or perhaps she just assumed I'd never look into it. He glowered, so what now? Are you just going to kick me out? I'm not kicking you out, I said. I'm simply going to live in my own home, and since I value my privacy and my peace, I imagine you and Alina will have to find somewhere else to play house. Just then Beatrice swept into the dining room, her silver hair pulled back so tightly her face looked even more severe. She held a thick legal document in her trembling hand. You've been busy, haven't you, Clara? She snarled, tossing the document onto the table, contacting my solicitor behind my back. I nodded calmly. Indeed, I had to verify my findings, did I? And Robert, your solicitor, I believe, was most helpful. He confirmed that the cottage and its accompanying trust are indeed legally mine, bequeathed by grandfather specifically to my mother and then to me. Julian gasped, "The trust? What trust?" Beatrice shot him a furious look. "A pittance, a mere trifle, not enough to live on, certainly." "A pittance that has accumulated interest for 20 years, Aunt Beatrice," I corrected, a triumphant smile finally breaking through. "And according to Robert, it's quite a substantial sum now, more than enough to provide me with a very comfortable start away from here." Her eyes widened in horror. "Away from here? What are you talking about?" "I'm leaving Aunt Beatrice," I stated simply. "Today, I'm moving into the cottage, and then, after I've settled some affairs, I'm taking some of that pittance and finally pursuing my art education, perhaps in Florence or Paris." Julian looked utterly bewildered. "But who will run the house? Who will take care of Mother?" "That, Julian, is no longer my problem," I said, standing up. "Your mother's son. Perhaps it's time you learned what useful truly means. Or perhaps Mother can finally hire the staff she's always claimed to have." Beatrice was speechless, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The carefully constructed facade of her life was crumbling before her eyes. "And one more thing," I added, turning back to face them. "James is coming to help me move my things into the cottage. He's a wonderful man, and I intend to have a real life with him. So if you're planning any more schemes to control my future, you'll find I'm no longer playing along." I walked out of the dining room, the scent of burnt toast and old resentment fatting with every step. The front door closed behind me, a resounding thud that echoed through the silent house. As I walked towards the cottage, the morning sun broke through the trees, casting long, golden shadows across the path. The air smelled fresh, clean, alive, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt truly free. James was already at the cottage, patiently waiting with his small car. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his kind eyes. "Ready for a new beginning?" he asked, opening the door for me. "More than ready," I replied, taking his hand. "Much, much more than ready." We spent the day moving my few belongings from the main house to the cottage. As I unpacked my sketchbooks and art supplies, a sense of peace settled over me. This was my sanctuary, my true home. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I sat on the porch of the cottage with James. We had ordered takeout, a simple but delicious meal, a far cry from Beatrice's elaborate, joyless dinners. My phone, which I had deliberately kept silent all day, finally buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it. It was from Alina Davenport. "Clara, this is Alina. I just had a rather illuminating conversation with Julian and with Beatrice. Thank you for opening my eyes. Rest assured, I won't be marrying into that family, and I'm keeping the shipping lanes. Perhaps we can have coffee sometime without the drama." I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. This was just the beginning. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I officially signed the documents with Robert, securing the cottage and the trust fund. I enrolled in an online art program at a prestigious European academy, planning my trip to Florence for a summer workshop. James was incredibly supportive, a steady presence amidst the upheaval. Beatrice surprisingly kept a low profile. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she had been forced to hire a full staff for the house, a significant drain on her finances. Julian, abandoned by Alina, was apparently adrift, trying to figure out how to live without his mother's constant direction or my free labor. One afternoon, a few weeks after I had moved into the cottage, there was a knock on my door. It was Beatrice. Her hair was still impeccable, but her shoulders seemed to sag, and her eyes held a glimmer of something I hadn't seen before: vulnerability. "Clara," she began, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. May I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. This was my home now, and I was in control. She looked around the cozy cottage, her gaze lingering on my art supplies, my half-finished canvases. "It's quite charming," she murmured. "It is," I agreed, waiting. She wrung her hands. I wanted to apologize for everything. I was wrong, Clara, terribly wrong. I stared at her, genuinely surprised. "An apology from you, Aunt Beatrice." She nodded, her eyes downcast. I was so afraid of losing control, afraid of Julian's ineptitude, afraid of being alone. I thought if I could just mold you, make you dependent on me, I wouldn't lose you too, like I lost your mother. Her voice cracked on the last words. My mother, her sister, a wound I knew Beatrice had never truly healed from. "I know it doesn't excuse my behavior," she continued, looking up, her eyes watery, "but I loved your mother, Clara, and when she chose her own path, her art, it felt like a rejection. I didn't want you to make the same mistake. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just controlling you." I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, of course, for all the wasted years, but also a flicker of understanding, even pity. She was still Beatrice, but something in her facade had cracked. "It's going to take a long time, Aunt Beatrice," I said, my voice steady. "A very long time for me to forgive you, and things will never go back to the way they were." She nodded slowly. "I understand. I don't expect them to. But can we at least try to be family, a real family this time?" I looked at the woman who had dominated my life for so long, and I saw, for the first time, not just a tyrant, but a lonely, flawed human being. "We can try," I said, a faint smile touching my lips. "But on my terms, Aunt Beatrice, on my terms." She actually managed a small, genuine smile in return. "Fair enough, Clara, fair enough." As she left, I felt a lightness in my chest, a sense of closure. The old resentment wasn't entirely gone, but it no longer held me captive. I was free. Free to paint, free to love, free to live my life on my own terms. The cottage, once a symbol of my quiet defiance, was now a beacon of my vibrant, independent future. I picked up a paintbrush, dipped it in vibrant blue, and began to paint. The canvas, like my life, was wide open, full of endless possibilities. The news of Beatrice's apology, however imperfect, began to ripple through the small town, causing quite a stir. Julian, surprisingly, took it the hardest. He had always relied on his mother's unwavering support and the illusion of his own importance. Without Alina and with Beatrice's attention diverted, he found himself utterly rudderless. I heard through the grapevine that he was trying to get a job, something unheard of for him. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. My art classes were exhilarating. I reveled in the freedom of creation, the joy of learning, the camaraderie with fellow artists from around the world. James often visited, bringing me books on art history or simply sitting with me in the cottage, watching me paint, his quiet presence a balm to my soul. He encouraged me to apply for the summer workshop in Florence, even offering to come with me if his university schedule allowed. One afternoon, as I was preparing for a video call with my art professor, Robert, Beatrice's solicitor, called. "Clara, I have some rather interesting news for you," he said, his voice unusually animated. "It seems your grandfather, a man of surprising foresight, included a clause in his will regarding the main house of the estate." My brow furrowed. The main house, what about it? "Well," Robert continued, "he stipulated that if the cottage ever reverted to direct family ownership, meaning your mother or her descendants, and if the primary occupant of the main house, your Aunt Beatrice, was found to be neglecting her familial duties towards that descendant, or if the descendant was living in a manner deemed unsuitable due to the primary occupant's actions, then a portion of the main house's estate would be transferred to the descendant to ensure their comfortable living and creative pursuits." I gasped, "Are you serious? Grandfather did that?" "Indeed," Robert chuckled. "He was quite the character, your grandfather. And given the circumstances of your 20 years here, Clara, and the documented evidence of your invaluable unpaid labor, I believe we have a very strong case for you to receive a significant portion of the estate. Not the entire house, mind you, but a substantial sum that would secure your financial independence completely." My hand trembled as I held the phone. This is incredible, Robert." "It's justice, Clara," he said, "a long overdue justice, and your grandfather, wherever he is, must be smiling." I hung up the phone, my mind reeling. Another revelation, another layer of my grandfather's quiet protection surfacing from the past. He had known Beatrice's nature, had anticipated her control, and had laid a path for my eventual freedom. It was as if his love, long after his death, was still reaching out to guide me. I called James immediately, my voice brimming with excitement. He was thrilled for me, his joy mirroring my own. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" he said. "It changes everything," I confirmed. "I can finally live without any financial worries. I can truly pursue my art without reservation." The legal process was smooth, thanks to Robert's expertise. Beatrice, initially furious, quickly realized the ironclad nature of her father's will. The irony was not lost on her. Her own father, whose wealth she had so proudly inherited, had ultimately provided for my escape and independence from her. The substantial sum from the estate settled into my new, separate account. I used a portion of it to renovate the cottage, transforming it into a beautiful, light-filled artist studio and home. I installed large windows overlooking the garden, a spacious work area, and a cozy reading nook. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. Julian, seeing my newfound independence and the undeniable financial security I now possessed, began to reevaluate his own life choices. Without his mother's constant pampering and without me to shoulder the household burdens, he was forced to confront his own lack of direction. Surprisingly, he came to me one day, hesitant and humbled. "Clara," he said, standing awkwardly at the cottage door, I wanted to ask your advice. I'm thinking of going back to school, maybe studying something practical, like horticulture. I always liked gardening, I suppose." I smiled. That's wonderful, Julian. It's never too late to find your own path. He actually looked relieved, and I wanted to apologize for being such a colossal jerk all these years. You deserved so much better. You're right, I said, meeting his gaze. I did, but I appreciate the apology, Julian. It means a lot. It was a tentative step, but a step nonetheless, towards healing old wounds and forging a new, more honest family dynamic. The summer workshop in Florence was everything I had imagined and more. I immersed myself in art, history, and the vibrant culture of Italy. James joined me for 2 weeks, and we explored the Uffizi Gallery, walked hand in hand across the Ponte Vecchio, and shared long, meaningful conversations over plates of pasta and glasses of Chianti. It was a romance born of shared respect and genuine affection, far removed from Beatrice's calculated matchmaking. Upon my return, I held my first solo art exhibition at a local gallery. My paintings, vibrant and full of life, told the story of my journey, the shadowed stillness of the old house, the blossoming defiance in the cottage garden, the serene strength of the ancient oak trees, and the expansive freedom of the open sky. Beatrice surprisingly attended the opening. She stood quietly in a corner, observing my work, her usual imperious mask softened by a flicker of pride. Later, she approached me, her gaze lingering on a painting of the cottage bathed in golden sunlight. "Your mother would have been so proud, Clara," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "She always saw the artist in you. I just couldn't see past my own fears." "Perhaps," I said, looking at her, "we both needed to see beyond the past." She nodded, a wistful smile touching her lips. "Perhaps, but you, Clara, you found your way, you truly did." And as I stood there, surrounded by my art, my friends, and the quiet support of James, I knew she was right. I had not just found my way. I had carved it out of years of silent struggle, armed with the quiet wisdom of my grandfather, the enduring love of my parents, and my own unbreakable spirit. The ghost of burnt sugar and old resentment had finally been banished, replaced by the sweet scent of freedom, creativity, and a future I was finally free to shape. My life was no longer defined by someone else's expectations. I was Clara, an artist, a woman independent and strong, and the story of my journey, painted in bold strokes and vivid colors, had only just begun. The Victorian house, once a prison, now stood as a testament to my resilience, and the cottage, my true sanctuary, was a symbol of a life beautifully reclaimed.